It will take time. I think in this semester the videos will not be available. We need to edit them. There are some problems. We have to follow them. We have to cover them. And because this is just a pilot study, pilot recording just for this semester. Okay, so last time we started chapter 3 and we discussed about certain objectives, and we saw that what project management actually it is, and what are the effective project manager responsibilities that can be ensured by a project manager. And then we also discussed that where is the actual problem, because the book has given you a case study for your better understanding that the knowledge you learn you should actually apply on a real situation. If you apply that knowledge on a real situation, it will help you in better understanding, right? So that is why I every time I recommend that you guys should have the book literature with you. If you do not have, at least get the book and make a copy of it. If you have a copy of it, at least you would be able to read something. So we saw that there are 3 systems running at the Pine Valley Furniture Company. One of them is order filling system, the other is invoicing system, and the third is payroll system. At this stage, the information is scattered everywhere, right? If somebody needs some information, he has to go there, ask that buddy, he refer him to other guy, he refer him to another guy. So it makes a big problem for him to organize information. So this was one problem. Secondly, they need to integrate all this information into a single system, so that if anybody want to access or want to utilize the system, it should be available at one single spot. So using a single application, everybody should be served. But obviously in this application, if user would have a different view, manager would have a different view, executive roles would have different views. From it's a kind of hierarchy. If you move from top to the bottom along the hierarchy, every level of management roles or administrative roles, they would have their own view of access. Now we move further. We discuss that what is a system service request. When some company wants to develop a system for them, how they should contact the development company. They make a system service request through a form. So this is the form. We discussed in detail that it has the name of the guy of the company who is requesting a service. Then there are contact details, of course, and then we saw that there are type of request. Either they want to develop a new system, or they want to make changes or upgrade or modify the existing system. So whatever is their requirement, they make a tick mark here like this. So this can be considered as what is their requirement. Then there was a portion in this form that they need to describe their problem. I hope that some of you guys might have taken some time during since the last lecture and would have gone through the slides that what is the actual problem. If somebody of you haven't taken or haven't read the slides yet, so I again strongly advise that go back and read the slides So it is better for you as early as you familiarize yourself with the case study of Pine Valley Furniture, it will be good for you, right? The more earlier you will start understanding the concept, the earlier you become able to apply the concepts you will learn. Okay. So now we have to define few terms. For instance, project. A project is a planned undertaking of related activities to reach or to achieve an objective that has a beginning and an end. So any group of activities that will be started somewhere and will terminate, will finish at some point, we will consider them as a project, and through this project we must have to meet a certain objective, and we will define that objective in the beginning of the project, what we want to achieve. Then project management is another term. It is a controlled process of initiating, planning, executing and closing down the project. Now, in fact, when the development team starts working on systems development life cycle, in fact, it is not only the systems development life cycle. In fact, this is a complete management process that would enable them to control the activities, how, when and by whom it should be performed. Okay. Then and remember, this is a project management, and then there is a next term, project manager. So by the term it is clear that it is the guy who will be responsible to manage the activities involved during the whole project. But if you guys remember, in one of our earlier lecture, we also defined a term, systems analyst. Who was that? Can anyone highlight this term? Who is this guy? What is the responsibility of the systems analyst, if you guys remember or not? Yes, anyone voluntarily? No problem, I can explain it again. In fact, system analyst is the guy who will be responsible to coordinate, to interact with the business organization and the development team, because this is the guy who understands the business procedures, business methodologies, overall organization, the understanding, the architecture of the understanding of the organization. This is understood by the system analyst, and then it explains to the development team. So it is a guy who is making a bridge between them, because the development team, not everybody of the development team needs to have awareness about what the business is and what the business is about. It is good to have information, but it is not possible to give information involved in the business, to give it to anybody, to everybody. So any system analyst with leadership skills and management skills is responsible for leading the project initiation, project planning, project execution and project closing down. So we will see next that project planning has a certain phases. For instance, initially or in the beginning, we discussed the phases involved in the systems development life cycle. That is the development life cycle, not the project management. Now we will see there are some as an umbrella, which serves as an umbrella under which systems development life cycle runs. Now, then at the end there is a deliverable. This deliverable means that the end product of the system development life cycle would be delivered to the customer, right? Whatever will be our product, we will deliver it to the customer. So and this deliverable will contain several things. For instance, it will contain a software, right? It will also contain the required hardware, how to install that hardware in the organization. Then the documentation, for instance, manuals. It is very important. When the system is developed, development team is also responsible to produce some manuals. How to use the system. Because for the users, it is a new system, so we need to explain them through the manual book. Normally, the systems are user friendly. Systems are developed keeping in mind that how friendly they are. We consider in mind, we keep in mind their usability. But anyway, if it has a good usability, the user would be able to handle and use, understand that system by himself. So friendliness is definitely there. However, for security systems, for more which are confidential systems, it is those systems are not that friendly. But anyway, this talk is going towards a bit detract, so I will come back to our topic. We will discuss later. Now you can see in this figure that a project manager acts like a juggler. You know who is a juggler? Do you understand who is a juggler? You know, the guy, for instance, if you go to some magic shows or like that, in some entertaining place, some people, they do have some balls in hand. More than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They throw one ball in the air and they have 2 balls at the hand. Right? Similarly, they can use any object in their hand. So what they are doing here? They are juggling those things, those objects. Now, in fact, project manager is not actually a juggler. It is a concept that he is acting like a juggler because there are several activities. For example, you can see here there is one activity like systems development life cycle. This is one aspect of the project. The other way, contractors and vendors, managing people, methodologies and tools, time and resource constraints. Then we have documentation and communication, customer and management expectations, technological change, and then again we come back to the systems development life cycle. Now if you see, manager, a project manager is monitoring these things regularly, right? Because he is the main guy responsible to manage. So what he is doing, he just take a look at hand, whatever he has. For example, he is interacting with contractors and vendors involved in the project to do some task in your project. We can ask some contractor, third party, to do this job for us because we may or may not have some facility, some service, some equipment to do that task at our own. So we can ask certain other contractors that do this job for us and then deliver it back to us. Managing people, assigning tasks to different people who will do what part of the project. Methodologies and tools, what type of methodologies should be used in that. So he is taking a look at everything, and ultimately when he keeps on throwing, this means once he look at a certain, because he is watching, he is observing, right? So that is why the author has used the term juggler, that he has to work like a, although he is not a juggler, right? So if you have any confusion here, you can ask a question. Until now. Yes. Mainly, there are 4 different phases of project management: initiation, planning, execution, and then shutting down or closing down the project. Now, this is not, please don't confuse these phases with systems development life cycle, because in exams it happens that students sometimes confuse systems development life cycle phases with the phases of the project management, or they confuse phases of the project management with the phases of the systems development life cycle. Okay. In project initiation, the first phase, what have to be done, or what is supposed to be done? That they need to assess the size, scope, complexity, and establish procedures involved in the project. Now, say assessing size of the project or scope of the project, that means they need to understand what are those, for example, organizational part or organizational departments that needs to be automated, that whose information needs to be digitized, who are going to part of the information system. So they need to assess. And secondly, they need to, in terms of the scope, for example, customer says that I only need an application, a web application, to use that information system, right? So this is part of their scope. Now somebody comes in and some customer also says, we also need an application for mobile phones along with the, so this will increase the scope of the project. So it is increasing the, ultimately increasing scope of the project will increase the size of the project as well. So size of the project, having more scope would force them or would conclude the development team to include more expertise, more skills into the project, that cause them to increase the size of the project. Then they need to understand the complexity. Where are those situations that can be difficult to handle? So at least not in the beginning, it is not possible for a project manager to precisely measure the complexities involved, but to a certain extent they should be able to understand the complexities involved in the project, so that any problem that occurs later they can handle and overcome that problem as early as possible. Now, in this project initiation phase, they need to establish certain things. For instance, they need to initiate a team. When you will study the the book, and when you will study in detail the case study of Pine Valley Furniture, you will see that they have clearly mentioned certain names in that case study who were given the responsibility to initiate who were given the responsibility to initiate the project. Now initiating, I hope you guys understand what do we mean by initiate. To start, right? Now those people were responsible. For instance, I can say Mr. ABC or Mr. XYZ, they are responsible to start or to initiate the project. But what they have to do, the main thing is what they have to do. Now they have to develop a relationship with the customer. These are the people who are responsible to meet with the customer, right, in order to understand his requirements, in order to understand or to meet his requirements. So the main thing to establish, the main objective to establish this relationship is to meet the expectations of the customer. Thirdly, project initiation plan. Now in the plan we define the activities. Until now the project has just started. When the project is started, we need to define activities involved, right? These activities are interrelated activities. This will define that when the analysis phase start and, for instance, when the analysis phase will end. Similarly, the activities involved in the analysis phase will be collected, how the user requirements will be collected, and when. So they need to put a deadline for each activity, how to or when and when to end it. So this is described in the plan. Then there comes management procedures they need to define. For example, one of the management procedure is to handling funds, handling the money involved in the system. They need to establish a certain procedure under which somebody, for instance from the development team, they are asking for some resources that has to be purchased from outside. So this means to pay for that there should be a certain form and procedure, who will send the request, who will sign it, who will forward it to some higher authority, and they will finally approve it. Once this procedure is established for everything, not only for handling funds but also for several other matters, for instance documentation is a very critical phase in which we define everything clearly, right? So how the documentation will be started and how it will be ended and who is going to review it at the end. Then project management environment. In this project they need to define tools. They need to for the project management, and we will discuss some of the tools in our further discussion, that how to plan them. Then there is the last thing, that is project workbook. If you look at this workbook here, in fact the workbook is it is a kind of repository, it is a kind of database that has all relevant information about the project in only single space. Because in project there are several teams working on different things, on different activities, they are doing different. So what they do, for example, this guy is responsible for an activity 1, or for a task is assigned to him, so at the end of the day he has to update. He has to update the workbook that would have a complete record about the project. And there are, what are those things? For example, this workbook will contain project overview. What is that? So in the first step they will define. Secondly, they have initiation plan and SSR, system service request, that is also included in the workbook. Thirdly, they have defined the project scope and risks. What will be covered in the project? So every detail is going to be defined in this workbook. Then management procedures, data descriptions, process descriptions, they will define and describe them in this book. Team correspondence, project charter and project schedule. So everything is related to the project that will be collected and recorded in a single place, so that if anybody or any member of the project needs some information, he should not go around and ask different people what is the status of the, or what is the current status of the project, what is the current status of that activity, what is the current status of the other task. So they will refer every time to this workbook in order to understand the status. Now this workbook, it doesn't mean that this workbook is only available in hard copy. Definitely there will be some soft copy for this, so that, or there will be some database and a web application can be developed in order to by providing some, let's say, security credentials, some username or password will be given to each user, so that they can have an access to the documents of the project. So that can be accessed through let's say a web app there. So until now, if you guys have any questions, please. It is the responsibility of the project manager, along with his team member, does not work alone. He do have some assistants, he do have some advisors who are working with in his team, some consultants, etc. So that team, project management team's responsibility is to decides all about these things. So that is why we are discussing all about. Now whatever the activity we are going to discuss here is the responsibility of project management, right? We are not discussing here the responsibility of a programmer or or a network engineer. Those are the technical sides, and those technical sides are covered only in systems development life cycle. Alright? Any questions? Okay?
Just without starting?
Yes.
Before everything?
Before everything. In fact, when any project is started, we need to make sure that the availability of the required resources. For example, I am looking for certain for some people who have the desired expertise. So I need to make sure before I start the project they should be with me. If I am looking for a certain software, certain hardware, or any other thing, I need to take permissions from some bureaucratical stuff, or I need to take permissions from the higher management, etc. So that should be ready, because project initiation, it provides us a certain baseline. We will discuss what is the baseline next. One more thing I will add here, that in this workbook you can see some numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and so on, that can continue. I mean, it's not that small book like the normal books you use. Normally it is a big book. It is supposed to be a big book that have a different tags and sections. For example, if I am looking for a certain information about some procedure, so I can go to the data management procedure section, number 4, I can go directly. So the purpose of allocating or putting these tags or flags is to go effectively or go quickly into that section, so that you don't need to bother yourself where is the required information in this booklet. Second phase is project planning. Now, when it comes to project planning, we must have to define clear activities and the work needed to complete each activity. Now, if I don't worry, don't be shy. If you don't understand, go ahead. Sometimes very minor things are not known, no problem. Nobody born with everything known. Everybody has to know in this world, right? So don't feel shy. I mean, I can give you a simple example of an activity. For example, during this lecture, if I conduct a short quiz, so I can say this quiz is an activity for this lecture. I can give you, okay, draw this diagram or draw that diagram. So this is a kind of short activity that can be quickly achieved. I can say, okay, the quiz starts at time 1:15 and ends at 1:20. There is just 5 minutes quiz. So it has a certain time limit, starting point and ending point, and so on. So now it says discrete activities. Clear means in the planning, when we define tasks or activities, there should be no confusions. I mean, the confusion in a sense, one guy involved in a project says, oh no, this is not my responsibility. The other guy says, this is also not my responsibility. Or the one guy says, oh, this has to be done by me. The another guy also claims, oh, this has to be done by me. This means both of them are confused. What has to be done by whom? So there should be clear cut, no confusions. When he reads it, he should understand what are my responsibilities, what are my roles, right? Now discrete means there should be no overlap. For example, he is working on an activity or a couple of activities. Discrete activities means that he should understand that an activity, when it is started and when it is completed. He should not be confused with some other part of the project, with some other part of the activity. Discrete, when an activity is started, for example, I can say, okay guys, you guys have to do two activities during the lecture. One is the quiz and second is to draw the diagram. Now you understand, both of them are discrete. First you will take the quiz, start time and end time. Once end time is finished, you will start drawing the diagram. So both of them are discrete. None of them is overlapped. Right? Okay. So you can see that project planning has a long list of things to do. Right? You have to keep in mind these things. How you are going to plan it is a different thing. Project planning, the main objective of the project planning, that you guys should not ignore or should not overlook. For example, I can say identify and assess risk is one of the activities involved in project planning. This means you should know it is the responsibility of the project manager. We don't want to listen from the project manager, oh, I forgot about to identify the risks involved. I hope you guys understand the meaning of risk. Let me explain this way. You know, when you drive a car at a high speed, what is the danger? What is the risk there? Huh? You are taking risk at every moment. You overtake from the wrong side, you are putting your life at risk. You are taking chances. In fact, this means the probability of when you overspeed or overtake a vehicle from the wrong side, or you change your lane without giving any indicator, you are putting your life and others' life at risk. Beginning, if not precisely, if not exactly, at least some idea should be assessed that what are the chances for this project to be successful, what are the chances for this project failure, right? We do not want to listen from the project manager, oh, I forgot, I did not make planning to identify the risks involved. So he has to assess, he has to determine, he has to evaluate by any way. Right? So what he is going to do, he has to define the project scope, as we said earlier also, that this is activity also involved in the project initiation. But here we have to define the project scope in more details. Alternatives. Alternative means if anything is not capable or cannot be done by this way, it the other way, if it can be done or not. Right? And this is very good in assessing risk. This is also required in assessing the risks involved. If I, for instance, do not determine the alternatives, the other ways to do one job or one task, cause the overall project delay time, that will increase. So divide the project into task and the sorry, I forgot, feasibility. When we are planning project, feasibility is another important thing. I think I also have discussed about the feasibility in one of my previous lecture. I hope you understand what is feasibility. Anyone can explain. Any one of you. Voluntarily, don't worry. Yes. Feasibility, determining feasibility of something means if it is really appropriate or if it is really suitable for us to work on it or not. Right? Keeping in mind the constraints. For example, the customer says, I need the project to be delivered within 6 months. This means time is very limited. So I as a development team or as a project manager, I will try to assess if it is really feasible for me to deliver this project within the 6 months period of time or not. If I say no, it will require at least 1 year. So in 6 months it is not feasible. So time is a constraint for me. Time is a constraint for me. Wants to pay might not be feasible for me to work on it. He is offering less and we need more. So that is another constraint. Financial budgets could be there. Human resources. Alright. Estimate the resource requirements. So we just in the beginning, what resources, what hardware, softwares or manpowers or other things. Right? Because when you start a project, we need several other, we need PCs, we need labs, we need printers and stationery, stuff like that. We need salaries for the employees. We need to determine, estimate. Estimate means we need to have in the beginning, we need to determine what? Approximately the required resources. Develop preliminary schedule. Preliminary schedule means what? What is a preliminary schedule? That you guys follow. For example, every student has a different schedule. Your classes or lectures are held at different time intervals. That is your schedule. So for the whole project, we need to define a schedule. We will say, okay, this is the project start line and this is the project deadline. And within the project, within this start and deadline, we define this project into different tasks and activities, out of which every activity or task will have a certain start line and deadline. But keeping in mind that all of them must be finished before the deadline of the project. If any activity or task is delayed, so that may cause the delay of the project. So a preliminary schedule is released in the beginning. Develop communication plan. Different teams will be working in the project. They need to communicate with each other. Okay, and we will discuss in detail. They have to be able to precisely communicate the information or exchange the information with each other effectively. They need to determine standards and procedures. They need to identify and risk. They need to create preliminary budget. They need to develop a statement of work. They need to set a baseline project plan. Statement of work and baseline project plan is coming next, so I will discuss it there. So once all these things are considered, and these are not limited to only these activities or tasks. When we plan as a project manager, you might look at a project from different perspectives. You may consider any other thing which is not discussed here, which is not described here. So as a project manager, this is your responsibility. If you overlook any one of them, your project may be in trouble. Not fail, but that may be misorganized. Right? If you do a big mistake, you ignore something very important, in that case it may be a failure. If you don't, for example, assess the risk, you just overlook. High probability, high chances.
All of this task is done by one person,
As I said,
project manager or management team.
it's a management team. It's the responsibility of the management team. So management team is a different part, whereas development team is a different part. In fact, some members of the development team are also the members of the project management. Right? They are not working solely, or they are not working alone. They have a mutual understanding with each other. They are, because if I say we have to finish analysis phase starting from this date to this date, I must coordinate with the development team or the analyst, system analyst. Are you guys able to do this task within these days? So they will say no. They may say, or they may say yes, we can do this task within the specified time if you provide us this and that resources. Okay? So again, it is mainly the responsibility of the project management team.
Okay, if we have any mistakes, this is inside the responsibility of just one person.
You know, the person who is answerable is project manager, who is actually heading the management team.
Project manager.
Yes, project manager. This is his headache to make sure he has, because it is not possible to put some guy at position of project manager who do not have any experiences. I mean, this guy would be highly experienced, highly technical. It would have leadership skills, some management skills, how to lead at front, how to talk effectively, how to coordinate, right?
So we have all these responsibilities.
Yes, he has to. He should have these responsibilities. If in another way, if we give this responsibility to somebody else, it is a different story. Okay? So, the next is planning detail. You can see in this diagram, we have shown a straight line. What is that? It has two axes. For instance, on the horizontal axis, we call it as planning horizon. Right? Planning. It is representing a time. For instance, this point is representing 1 week. Next is representing 1 month. Second is representing 6 months. So in fact, this is representing the time when a project was started. When project was, and we see that this is the point where the project started, and now it is 1 week after that. So let me explain it. So we see here 1 week out after the project is started, 1 month out after the project is, then 6 months after 6 months, right, and so on. Maybe project is lengthier, so we can continue. You see here on the vertical axis we have 3 levels. low level, medium level and high level. These levels are representing the planning detail, right? And we can see here that after the project was started, right after the 1 week, we have the planning details are very high. Planning details are very high. But with the passage of time, what is happening? Planning details are coming down and down, lower. So after 6 months, it is quite low at the low level. Why it is so? Why it is so? You know, when a project is started, there are lots of things in mind, right? There are several confusions, several things, several tasks, several activities which are not clear. They try their best to make them clear, but in fact they have to plan them. So in the beginning, planning level is too high because they have so many things to do. But once a project is started, you know, once a project is started, and when the time passes on, the project start getting mature, right? Project starts getting mature and everything starts precisely defined at that time. So when the project is started, the planning things, they becomes, because after 6 months everyone is familiar with the project and they know, oh yes, this is what I have to do and how I have to do, I know this because procedures are established, all descriptions about the roles and their importance is defined, who has to do what part of the project, this is pretty clear at that stage. But in the beginning, they do not know anything. That is why they have to do a lot of paperwork in order to establish things. So that is why planning details are high. But when the time goes on, planning details, do you get this point or no? Right? It is very similar. I quote you a daily life example. If I want to take my car onto the highway, my target is to drive my car in the 4th lane at a speed of 120 degree. I cannot go directly there. You know, to me, the risks are very high when I just enter onto the highway. Right? When I enter onto the highway, I have to be very careful. If anything is coming from the back, how I have to manage my speed in the 1st lane, then in the 2nd lane, and in the 4th lane, 3rd lane. I cannot go because once I arrive in the 5th lane or 4th lane at the highest track, now I am comfortable there because I know the maximum speed is 120 degree and I can go easily with that. Once I get involved or once I enter into the stream of traffic, that makes me easier. But for the first time, if you are going to the highway, it is really difficult to manage yourself. You have to, especially for that guy who is driving for the first time, he is scared of the highway traffic. It runs very fast. Driving a vehicle in the town is different, but on highways it is different experience. So it is like, I mean, this example is only, I have quoted this example just for your understanding, but it's not like, I mean, it has no direct relationship with the project management or, but anyway, any questions until here? No questions at all? Okay. Good. Having no question, two meanings. One meaning, everything is clear. And second meaning is, nothing is clear because it is very boring. Okay, today I will stop here. I have some, I cannot continue to speak too long. I have some problem hopefully in the next week. So let me stop.